So we wanted to have a very simple approach to today's gathering. And Father Kirill and Father Nicholas suggested that we start with um, sort of updating you all on the status of life in our parishes. We have three very different communities, as Father Kirill hinted at. I have a parish that's relatively young. We were only 18 years old, and I've been with them for most of their history. Father Kirill's is one of the oldest parishes in the entire OCA, if not, is it the oldest in the lower 48, Father?
Of all jurisdictions.
All jurisdictions, yes. And then and St. Nicholas Orthodox Church in Mogador is interesting because it's part of the older, in the Midwest, part of the Rust Belt, but also a relatively new parish compared to some of our older parishes like St. Theodosius Cathedral and others. So three different communities, three different parts of the country. I'll say about our parish, our community here, Kentucky, the governor was very aggressive in the early days of the coronavirus, and we buttoned up very quickly. Our own diocese, the Diocese of the South of the OCA, was one of the stricter dioceses early on as well. And so we very quickly limited church life, and it was very difficult for us. And gradually, Kentucky has reopened, and right now it seems that we're allowed to do a lot more than some other places in the country. And the diocese blesses this. Our current rule is 6 feet distancing in the church. Masks are mandatory. I think the governor of our state requests them, and the diocese requires them. We have, of course, a strict sanitation regime. Our attendance cap by the state is 1/3 of capacity. So for our particular parish, the nave which normally would fit 170 or 180 by capacity, we're limiting to 60. But we've opened the parish hall, and we're live streaming the liturgy downstairs, and we have a capacity there of 75, and we can commune them downstairs, and we've set it up like a chapel. So we're kind of, for the weekday services, we're almost back, if you will, to normal, but we wear masks, and there's this sort of, we don't do fellowship. Any instruction is limited to maybe 5 minutes of me giving a teaching, 10 minutes of a teaching, and but no classes that are not online. Everything in person is very limited. And then on Sunday, we're divided into two, but at least everybody that wishes to come can come. And we've had 85% of our people return to church in some form, and about 65, 75 are coming every Sunday, again, divided up in the two upstairs and downstairs fashion. So that's our update. Father Nicholas, would you say a word about where you all are?
Well, very similar to Kentucky, Father. We, like you, were shut down very quickly. Our governor was very aggressive and made it necessary for us to stay home. For us, the transition from in-house services to live streaming services was something more natural, and we can talk about that later, in the sense that we had those in place. We are back right now at 50 attendees in church. We too have a very large building, can probably seat probably closer to 300. But Archbishop Paul, like Archbishop Alexander, has been very aggressive and very careful about allowing us to open and how we would open. So like yourself, we are limited in terms of numbers. We're all wearing masks. Sanitation policies are all in place. No education, no fellowship. We're kind of hoping that the ability might come. I don't know if Archbishop Paul is on this session or not. I can't see everybody that's here, but we're hoping. Ohio continues to kind of roller coaster. So we have moments where our cases drop, and then we have areas that kind of resurge. So Cuyahoga County is only 2 counties away. It's back in the red and closer to more severe restrictions where people in public there are required to wear masks. Here in Portage County, we're at level 1, and the adjoining county, Summit County, is at level 2. Where people aren't required to wear masks, but they are required for church. We're hoping that maybe before the season ends, when it gets a little bit cooler, if we're still kind of under these restrictions, that we might get a blessing to kind of bring the whole parish back together outside for an outside liturgy to do something where we can have people come and social distance and do those kind of things. But life is definitely different for us, as I'm sure it is for all of you, presenting us new challenges, new learning experiences, and new joys and new sorrows, as it were. But we continue to move forward and do our best. And this forum hopefully will grant us the opportunity to learn from each other, to continue to grow and to move forward.
Thank you, Father Nicholas. Father Kirill, would you say a word about where Holy Trinity Cathedral is right now?
Sure. Well, our city was one of the first, I think perhaps the first major metropolitan city to shut down its economy. We had about 100 people coming on Sundays before the pandemic struck, and around 25 to 30 the weekend before the shutdown occurred. People here tend to be very appreciative of the government's restrictions and regulations. We don't have very much pushback on the kind of public health concerns as kind of a culture, as a place, and we're still not open, and that's incredibly frustrating because actually our numbers are very good, and there are a lot of people in our parish that are okay with maintaining the course of having the economy and church life shut down, and others who are really suffering. So what we've been doing, and our Archbishop is resident on the premises, so he's been a great help and a leader in all of this, and we're kind of in very real time adjusting the controls day by day. Is we're live streaming the services, and the city allows a team of up to 12 to live stream the services as needed, as at most 12. So it takes me a lot of people to live stream. It's just so hard. I need like 12 people to run the iPad, So we have lots of services, many more than we ever had before in parish life, I think, since at least the 19th century. And we're just doing our best to get people in the door that want to come into the door. And it's going to be a slow recovery. But of course, we pivoted very quickly, and I'll speak more about that. But very early on, I was very inspired by what I saw St. Nicholas Cathedral, our primatial cathedral, doing with Zooms every night. And I said, well, why wouldn't we do that? It was the middle of Lent. It was March, if you remember, and we pivoted right away to kind of keep things going. So I think for us, what's grating on us is the day-by-day changes. I don't know what this weekend what we will be allowed to do this weekend yet, and I haven't even announced a service schedule yet because of that, because it's changing day by day. But and I think, yeah, I'll wait for other parts of the conversation to say more. But our parish, just to give you one more piece of data point, is we have about 20 or 25, depending on how you count, Orthodox parishes across all jurisdictions in San Francisco. Almost every ethnic group is represented here historically. We're the only parish that's all English in San Francisco proper, and that's really our niche. So a very mixed community, a very diverse community, and in all the senses of the word, almost all the senses of the word, and what's interesting is it's a strange blend of city and regional kind of church. So I'll speak more about that when we get to that part of our program. Thanks, Father Justin.
Thank you, Father Kirill. You mentioned earlier that my parish is a mission parish. In some sense, from our conversations, I've learned that your cathedral is also a mission parish, very much kind of in a different key than a traditional old established cathedral. It's very interesting.
Yeah, we have a beautiful temple, but have to constantly refresh our parishioner base with the way people kind of come in and out of the city. So it's every day is a new beginning, it feels like.
Thank you both. It was decided we want to kind of be honest about the challenges that we're all facing. I know Father Kirill very well, and I know Father Nicholas, and in our conversations, we've been very honest about how difficult this has been for our clergy and laity, both. Some, as Father Kirill alluded to, some are more at peace with things, others are struggling more. But one of the things that we all discovered was, as we began to do different initiatives during the phases of the coronavirus, we all ran into some major problems. And we wanted to be honest about, maybe describe one challenge or one failed initiative that we launched that we're not going to continue as we go further into this crisis and beyond. So would Father Nicholas like to maybe mention one attempt that failed or didn't work so well?
Well, I don't know that we have anything that really failed dramatically. I think one of the things we realized very quickly as a parish is how much we in the modern world became to rely on our technology. So while we were streaming well and connecting well and facing the challenges of Zoom, I think the greatest sadness that I as a pastor and the members of my parish council faced is that we realized that in moving forward to stay with the technology and to do the things that were necessary, we forgot about a large element of our parish that aren't technologically connected. So one of the things that we won't do again in that sense is forget about those those people that don't have technology. Not only our older members, even some of our younger families, because of economic challenges and things, even things like a smartphone aren't possible. So we stemmed the tide of Great Lent and other things very well, but then just by someone coming to church one day not knowing of the restrictions and the challenges with a child who has certain disabilities that really doesn't allow them to the function of staying away from others. That sadness kind of entered into our heart that while we thought everyone was well informed and we were doing well, that we had failed a portion of our parish just by simply not taking the time to kind of take a deep breath and think, well, there are people who depend on getting the bulletin in the mail and doing those things. And when the virus came, it caused us to lose those people that were providing those ministries, sending those things out and keeping people in touch. We lost them. So I think that for us was probably the greatest disappointment, and maybe not something that we wouldn't do again, but in the sense of trying something and having it not work, but something that we need to make a better note of, that as we move forward, we have to remember all elements of our parish and do all those things that are necessary to kind of keep people in touch and involved and part of the community the best that we can.
Thank you, Father Nicholas. Father Curl, would you share a bit about an initiative that you undertook that you might not continue?
Yeah, I mean, I think I still feel so in the thick of it that I'm not sure I have the best perspective on that, because some of the things, even if some of the things we haven't seen the net result yet, I think probably while I think there were a lot of blessings that came from it, I think we probably started off, we being me in this case, started off doing too many Zooms right at the beginning, and in a way that was unsustainable, probably in terms of expectations and also for energy and so forth. I think probably I would advise myself going backwards a more gradual ramp up. Yeah, I think the other thing too that probably is a bit of a failure that I wanted to learn from in this is how much more delegation, how much more lay leadership I need to foster proactively and boldly. I think I tend to be kind of nervous about loosening my grip on what's happening, and probably need to find a new way to lead where others are brought into the mix more effectively. But I want to blend that also with a learning that I had early on that people really mostly want to hear from the priest. We tried phone trees and things like that at one stage in Lent, and the reality is everyone feels special and wants to feel special and wants to feel known and seen and heard. And I think I probably would have started my own phone tree more earlier in the cycle of the pandemic. I told myself I would call 10 parishioners a day or something like that early on, and I didn't as quickly as that, and that might have been a mistake.
No, Father Curl, I can totally relate to people wanting to hear from the priest. Ideally, that wouldn't necessarily be that important, but it seems to be. I'll share a couple. One really sort of one challenge we've had. We immediately began, not quite as aggressively as Father Kirill. In fact, he inspired me to do some Zoom things. But we did begin a couple of Zoom activities, and the House Party app for a virtual coffee hour was very popular initially. But one thing we've noticed, and Joe alluded to this, just the fatigue with technology, Zoom fatigue. The House Party coffee hour was very popular for maybe a month and a half till about Pascha. Then there was a real downturn in all of that. So while maybe a handful of people still use it, I don't think it'll be something we push or continue very actively in the days to come. Again, I think it's just the whole, everyone's tired. My kids didn't want to do church camp this year because it was online. They said, Dad, we don't want to do that. But of course, I'm glad it's there, and I hope people can use it. But I think in my parish community, there wasn't the energy for it, maybe, that would be there for some other communities. Though other parishes seem to be handling that differently than ours. So again, it underscores that there's a lot of variety and what people are experiencing and how they're perceiving what's going on. It might be appropriate right now to pause and to ask a couple of participants in this circle here, beyond the three priests, to weigh in with a challenge that they've had in the parish and something they might not continue. Would anyone like to speak up now? Before we move on to the things we might continue beyond this.
My name's, excuse me, Father Stephen Hosking. I'm from Clinton, Connecticut, St. Alexis Orthodox Church. And up until this year, we didn't even have internet in the church. So we had to start from scratch to be able to get services streamed from church. And so the biggest challenge we had to face was finding an internet provider to start with, and then finding what technology would be appropriate in our church and how we were going to make use of it. So we've done this whole thing from scratch. And it was, rather than using something like Facebook Live, because we have a great many parishioners who don't have the technology to use Facebook, we had to find a platform that everyone could use, including people who just had phones and wanted to hear the services. So we've had to build everything, and it's taken quite a bit of time. Not only that, but to convince the parish council we needed to spend the money to do this.
Thank you, Father. I think in the interest of time, we're going to go and talk about the three priests will continue to weigh in, by the way, on the chat. I'm sort of new to this chat and talking things simultaneously. Forgive me. But let's go ahead and move on. I'd like to ask Father Kirill to share a couple practices that are helping the community now and may continue as we move into the rest of this year and beyond. Father Kirill, would you share a couple of things at this point?
Yeah, I'm gonna do it more in a quicker list format, in the hopes that if something strikes an interest, people can chat and on the side, and we can come back to it. I think one thing that we did explore during the height of the pandemic, around Holy Week especially, and Lent, is not necessarily only live streaming services the way we've always served them, not just like having the priest and a chanter in the church, but doing things where we tried to use the screen sharing capacity of these platforms to show things like, I'll give you an example. In the Ekathist service to the Mother of God in the 5th week of Lent, we prepared for every ecos and Kontakion of the Akathist, which you may know is long. I mean, there's 13 sections divided by 2. It's really 24 sections. We had the appropriate icon for the imagery of the Mother of God in that section, and the text displayed on the screen. The priest and the choir still sang their parts, but instead of staring at my back, there was an icon and the text to follow along with. So that's an interesting conundrum. Is that more engaging? Is it not? Is that, we had more people attend the Akathist online than ever attended in person during normal times. So what do I learn from that? I'm not really sure yet, but I don't want to just like forget about that insight and never address that again. I don't think we want to be, LCD screens in the church kind of thing necessarily, but there's something to learn from that, and I'm not exactly sure what. And then since you asked for 2, Father Justin, I think the other thing that I really, I'm going to do 3, but very quickly. The other is delivering meals to people suffering in parish life. And I use the word suffering because we're doing that not for just people that are suffering from poverty or loss of jobs or whatever, but for all sorts of needs, mostly psychological actually. So that kind of combination of psychological and real hunger or poverty, and empowering lay people to do that, but with my list of needs, which can seem arbitrary to most people, but hearing the confessions and hearing the counseling and so forth, it's been a kind of an interesting experiment. And my last thing that I want to point out is related to that, which is why I wanted to also include it, is boy, do I need a bigger Rolodex of professionals like marriage counselors, couples counselors, suicide counselors, things like that. As this has dragged on, we've had in our small parish, I've had 5 marriages in crisis, the kind of crisis where I'd have to spend more than one phone call working with people. So developing those contacts and having that kind of cadre of professionals behind me, I feel like it is becoming much more important, and probably it always was, and maybe the pandemic just brought that into focus, is I guess what I'm really trying to say.
It's funny how both our initiatives that are working and are not working, they blend together almost seamlessly, and we're still assessing kind of where things are going to land. Father Nicholas, would you share a word or 2 about some practice that may continue in the days ahead?
Well, I mean, obviously we started live streaming 3 years ago, so and have a full-fledged system in. And if there are people out there that are interested in the technology side of that, there's a techie session later on that you can kind of get more ideas about what to do and how it works. So kind of, I think St. Nicholas probably is mirroring, as you said, Father Justin, maybe all of our parishes are kind of blending in together, but just in terms of the streaming, we wanted to find a way as we moved into the pandemic to engage people more so that it wasn't just a show. So we established a OneDrive link on Microsoft, and for every service, the texts are posted. And we encourage people not to just watch church, but to actually participate in church. So they can go on our Facebook page. So some of you may have been familiar. There's quite a number of people following us. But since the pandemic started, we've been doing a service every day. Initially, it was myself and my family. Some people more or less, now that we're adding others, come to join us. But just encouraging people to pray every day, in a certain sense, just to begin in a real way a more spiritual life. We get caught up in our lives and do the things that we do, but instead of sitting home during restrictions and guidelines, to take that opportunity to pray. So the text of every Akathist is posted. There's the liturgy services there. Almost any service that we do, aside from the Vespers evening services that are more difficult to post the full text for each service, they're all there on OneDrive. We had a very active hot meal, feeding 75 to 100 people once a week here at the church before the pandemic. Thankfully, when the pandemic hit, those people that worked the hot meal decided that they weren't going to let that ministry pass. So 2 or 3 still come once a month as they have before, and with social distancing, prepare meals and deliver those meals now out into the community around us. For the most part, I think now during the pandemic, it has been to our own shut-ins and those people in need, rather than to the local community. But I think as we continue to grow in this situation, we'll grow that list. So whether it be soup and sandwich or something, they cook them, they take them, drop them off on the porch, and leave them there. The last thing I'll say that as we continue forward, to reach our shut-ins and people, again, those people that aren't technologically savvy, or those people that wish to come to communion but can't actually come in the church door, similar to that woman with her older disabled son who can't come. We're working now on a way to bring those people via our Wi-Fi outside, if they don't have a device of their own, to be able to come to church, to stay, to social distance in their own car. And I can show you just by turning my computer around the kind of thing I'm working on. Not only am I joining you today in tech, but I'm also continuing to work on tech for the parish, and that people will be able to take a Chromebook outside, give it to them in their car, or take it to their homes if they don't have a computer in their home but manage to have Wi-Fi access, to just kind of keep them connected to the parish and to do that. Again, we kind of forgot that aspect of the parish that didn't have technology and or didn't have access at least to a device. We're trying to re-engage them and make it possible for them to be a part as best they can under the restrictions. And I think as we move forward, we'll continue to develop that. I know my wife and some of my Sunday school teachers have been kind of on me about what's church school going to look like come August and September, because if the virus continues the way that it is here, we're not going to be able to begin our church school in-house. So a lot of our kids are doing distancing from school, and a lot of our schools are talking about the older kids, but also trying to find some way, maybe against the technology, to allow them opportunities to have some socialization too, as things allow, because I think that's the greatest thing that all of us are losing, is that as we suffer our Zoom fatigue, we're realizing how much we actually missed being together with each other. So those are the things that are kind of working for us, and that we're hoping to continue to develop and grow into, so that we can continue to keep our parish together and continue to spread the message, as it were.
Father Nicholas, I love that you are trying. Obviously, you're limited what you can do in terms of people coming to church for most of the pandemic, but
right.
Trying to keep that, like the meals going, something flesh and blood.
Right.
It just reminds everyone, no, we're still one body in Christ, and trying to make that somehow real.
I think the most important thing in this, Father Justin, maybe the thing that we'll learn from the conferences today, is we can't stop being a church, and trying to figure out how we do that with the current restrictions and things that are here. We need to pray. We need to be charitable. We need to take care of others, and we need to social distance and protect ourselves. How all that works, I don't know that we'll have the answers to today, or maybe 6 months from now, but we'll learn if we continue to do the things that are necessary. So.
Before I give an answer to that, I wanted to back up. Father Krill in the comments mentioned something that it really impresses me, that at their cathedral, they've had higher attendance by virtual Sunday school than with real Sunday school. Father, would you say a word about that, how it's worked and why it's worked, and how that might be going forward?
Yeah, I mean, to put a nuance on that, it's specifically for the youngest learners that it's been great by Zoom. The older kids don't particularly enjoy it, maybe kind of like what you were saying with your kids and my older kids, Father Justin. But for the youngest learners, in my kind of grades K through 4 group, what's been great about the Zoom church school is their attendance is like almost 100%. They're there every week, which allows us to to get a rhythm. And part of it is, you know, a new teacher kind of took charge, who's actually really talented at teaching by Zoom. Um, but I think part of it also is the kids are so starved for other human little children, in a way that, and don't get fatigued in the same kinds of ways that we do. But that consistency without the pull of Tahoe or skiing or family trips or work trips or soccer games or whatever, in our environment has been really impressive. And the OCA Church School that Father Joseph is talking about in the chat, especially at the beginning or at the height of the pandemic here, was a great kind of addition to that as well. So we find in our environment that, and the Pew surveys of the nation overall, not just Orthodox, but everybody, show that that people in this country consider regular church attendance to be 2 to 3 times a month. So, and we see that with our families very often, like they kind of have an every other plan, I think, that they've developed in their hearts and minds. And what's interesting is a lot of those families that I was frustrated with in that regard have attended every Sunday since the pandemic struck by live stream, and their kids have been at every church school. So, you know, there are some blessings in all of this. And I think part of it is people discovering that there is like a rhythm to the church life that's not just like a drop in when skiing's not happening. As can you tell, I dislike the skiing around here, but yeah, the church school with the younger kids has been very exciting by Zoom.
And by younger kids, what's the age group there?
I break it up kindergarten through 4th grade, but it's somewhat arbitrary.
Okay. So you have one class that's pretty effective in that age group.
Yeah, I mean, we have about 14 kids that participate in that.
Okay, thank you, Father. I'll share a couple things that are working okay here that we might continue. One, of course, is live streaming. I think that's a common thread here. I think even though we have most people coming back to church at this point, we still are getting 30 to 40 households or people following along for at least part of the service. And 10 to 20% of my people are still kind of staying away that are elderly, and they really appreciate it. So I can't imagine us not doing that in the near future. And perhaps as, you know, population ages, that'll keep going anyway. So that's going well. Also, video, I've done a handful of video exhortations here and there, and Father Kirill, so my clock's going off and I don't want to turn it off. Stop. Oh. Save me, Father Kirill.
I'll just, I'm going to talk for a second. I'm going to address a question in the chat about deacons. And I just want to say really quickly while Father Justin gets resettled, there was a question in the chat, like how can deacons help in this moment? There's a few things. One is an appreciation that all the patterns of church life are broken. All the things that we are used to have changed. And what I mean by that is many priests, I think, up until this point, really enjoyed coming to church early on Sundays and getting things set up and pittering around the church and kind of cleaning things up and setting them all just so, and kind of enjoyed even some of the more, maybe you might say, menial tasks of preparing for the Divine Liturgy. At least for me, the stress level of preparing these Zooms and checking in with people and so forth, it's a lot more work than we've ever had to do before. And I think if the deacons on this call and others have the opportunity to just kind of observe, like what might be falling off, what might be changed, who's not at church that normally helps with certain things. Like in our cathedral, I never before the pandemic had to worry about lighting all the lamps in front of each icon, for example. But during the height of the pandemic, I had to do it all. And we have a deacon present. So whenever he's been able to jump in and just like take care of those things without being asked, because I don't want to ask him because he's probably stressed out too, you know? So I think if the deacons can just be really aware of where the need is and volunteer up to their level. And yes, I see in the chat a comment from somebody. I think being forthright with the deacons, if you are a priest, about what could help is really nice too. I think I think we need to be very humble in this moment, and that humility is going to take new forms. You know, well, as I said, there's things that I have to do now as a parish priest I never thought were part of the job description, and you know, as things change, maybe the deacons will have to adjust and change things as well. I do have a broader point. Father Justin, do you want me to keep going for a second, or I think, you know, this whole idea of parish life and who participates in what and how, I think we have a chance to do a massive reset, especially in our metropolitan areas. I don't know if we will take advantage of this, and Joe kind of talked about this in his opening remarks this morning a little bit. I don't know if we'll take advantage of this moment, but I've been wondering, as I see parishioners joining in by Zoom and live stream and things like that from far, far away, I wonder if we need to reset what it means to be a parishioner in some places. You know, there's some places where there's only one church, and there's other places where people drive past 5 or 6 churches to get to their favorite. What does that mean? How can we leverage technology? Should we have micro local kind of centers led by deacons and lay leaders and attached priests and things like that, or in historically ethnic parishes in certain suburbs for weeknight and Saturday night kind of activities, and then let people go wherever they prefer on Sundays in terms of that kind of Sunday fellowship? I guess I'm saying I'm not sure that the model of like one person, one parish is necessarily exactly where the most growth is, and that's where I think deacons could become really interesting partners in the process.
Father Carrillo, this leads into my last point, actually. Thank you for saving me. It's my mom's clock and I don't know how to operate it. One of the things that maybe is unique here, because things were relaxing earlier in Kentucky compared to, say, San Francisco, where things are still not relaxed, people began to take initiative. One of the things that was really hard for our people, besides not being able to receive communion for a couple months, was the loss, which continues now, of fellowship time. And my people have taken incredible self-direction, if you will, by starting to gather and have bonfires together and do things with social distancing in place, but outside at their homes, you know, offering their backyards for gatherings that are appropriate. And informally, they've been starting to organize them intentionally to include people who are not their best buddies, you know. And I've been very encouraged by this. This is not something I've directed or been part of. It's been lay-led, lay-initiated, and it's been really wonderful for helping keep the community together. But it's been broken down, as you noted, into smaller groups. Some of those groups based upon location. We have a number of small towns in the area, and people, you know, are gathering in those places. I think that's very encouraging and exciting, and I'm pretty sure that will continue. And it continue now because we're still not out of the woods, of course. But then beyond, it's led to discussions about forming smaller missions, even groups that gather for Vespers on one night of the week, but come to liturgy on Sunday. But in the event of, you know, if this were to linger longer, they could gather in smaller groups, perhaps for a while. I know that some of my laity during the height of the pandemic would gather in small groups to pray, even not with my blessing, but they just would do it. And so that isn't all bad. And I'm grateful that people have taken some initiative there. So those would be the things that I would note that would be kind of exciting and things worth continuing. There are a number of questions that have come up. Let's see. I'd like to hear from some other people who might have some practices that are working that might be worth continuing in the days to come.
Could I suggest a format for that, Father Justin?
Yes, Father.
Maybe people can introduce very briefly in out loud, kind of like I am now, what that practice is, and then in the chat after they've spoken, say something about that practice, so that if someone wants to contact them or reach out to them. I'm just being mindful of the clock, and I want to make sure people get connected with the ideas that they're inspired by.
We have 15 minutes left, so.
when I'll talk
Hey,
about
one,
This is Father Stephen Gresh at Holy Resurrection in Mount Vernon. If you don't mind, I'd like to chime in a bit. I consider myself to be a Luddite extraordinaire. So when it comes to actually being really effective in getting the message out there, that's a real challenge for me. When all this hit, we had some people within the parish who stepped up so that we can at least get some simple messages out. But one other thing that we did, and we encouraged very highly, is we have the monasteries that do have the services on a regular basis. So we actually got them the links that they can tune in to either St. Tikhon's or Elwood City. And we also gave them the link for Mogadir because we know that they have been doing the live streaming for a long time. And one of the positive things that came back out of this is that a lot of parishioners who have never ever been to a monastery before had a chance for the first time to actually see that they do have a spiritual life at the monasteries, and then when they saw Mogador and them having the ability to do things in a relatively professional manner, a lot more interest came here to see if there's anything that we can in fact do. So no, I'm not I'm not a techno geek yet, but we have people looking if there's other stuff that we can do, and we actually had people come to some of the limited services we had from outside the church because they saw stuff electronically, and they saw that we had something on a regular service basis. So I'll let it be at that.
Thank you, Father Deacon. It was a really interesting comment about the possibility of tents and outdoor structures. Are any of you using something like that? And with your bishop's blessing, I'm curious. And how's that going? Maybe no one is.
Hello, this is Mary Flatini from Sacramento.
Hi.
Hi, and in our parish, thanks to Father Timothy's guidance, we are using our pavilion as the extension to the church, thank God. So even though, well, prior to the restriction that now we're back to just the server and the priest and the chanter, when we had I think 30 people in the parish can attend inside the church, and then everybody else, unlimited, can be in the pavilion. So we set up the pavilion with icons and an icon screen, and we have to set it up and take it down, but we do that every week to enable parishioners to attend, and that was going so well for 4 weeks until we're back to square one again.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that.
I envy people.
Go ahead, Father. Sorry.
I just envy people that can have outdoor space. That's actually all that's legal in our city right now is outdoor worship, which we just can't do in our city setting. So, yeah, another layer of flexibility. If you have it, I encourage you to use it if you're allowed to.
I'm intrigued by the level of interest in the long. Again, we're talking. Part of this group is to discuss long-term ideas that we might use based upon our experiences in the pandemic. And the one that is getting a lot of traction here is the idea of people of having smaller groups with the priest visiting the outlying groups but coming together on Sunday. I think this is basically what happened in my diocese in the Diocese of the South in Dallas, Texas. They started these smaller gatherings around Dallas, and over a period of 20 years, 5 or 6 of them became parishes. It's a pretty good model, I think, and it's one that we are exploring here in Kentucky, and I'm excited that it's other places like DC as well. So, if anyone would like to speak to that, I invite you to right now. I know you're there, Father Sean.
Okay, I've called out. Yeah, it's been a joy
as a military chaplain, I don't have the privilege of serving regularly at an established parish. And when the idea came up in the Fairfax Station area south of DC to start something, because I wasn't directly attached, I was kind of a good candidate to do Vespers, which we weren't doing on Fort Belvoir. I wasn't serving Vespers for the Army community, just Sunday morning liturgy. So I was able to be a part of the Saturday evening Vespers, and that became rapidly very popular and just a lot of fun, I think, for all of us. And most people that would come to Vespers with us would then go to any number of parishes in the DC area. And traffic on a Saturday evening, Saturday afternoon to get into DC, and it was kind of rough. And so we were kind of south of DC, and we formed this kind of little mini community. I mean, the intent, of course, is for it at some point to become a parish. But one wonders about the idea of kind of satellite, communities that would meet from other established parishes at a more convenient location for certain services, weekday services, and then be at their home parish on Sunday morning for the Divine Liturgy. I think, especially in these kind of metropolitan areas, that makes a whole lot of sense, and you get to know people that you wouldn't otherwise know, which is a great builder of fellowship and community and solidarity, and it does help people not to have such a hectic Saturday evening if they can go 10 or 20 minutes to Vespers and enjoy that service with a group of people. And then we would meet afterwards. We'd go right to the little fellowship hall that we were borrowing from the local Catholic church. And we would sit and we would talk about the lectionary, the gospel reading for the following Sunday morning, and have a little meal together. This, of course, is before COVID, and off we go. And then, of course, people would travel on Sunday morning when the traffic is not quite so hectic to get into DC and go to any number of parishes. And I think not just as a way of planting churches, but perhaps as a way of expanding ministry, I think it would be a really interesting thing to ponder.
Father Sean, thank you very much for sharing that. It's inspiring. Someone just posed a question. Well, I think the ability for us to be flexible and to meet the need both of the sacramental life of our people on one hand is really vital. On the other, what I'm seeing here in this conversation and elsewhere is the importance of fellowship and being able to hold those two things together. You got to have some, I think we have to have some kind of in-person contact with our people as we have in-person sacramental life. The ways people are doing this are encouraging to me. And of course, we're all operating under different restrictions, but I'm looking at one of the comments here that Zoe just asked. Zoe, would you like to speak to that question?
It wasn't exactly a question, just sort of that as a choir director, I got asked a lot for resources, especially near the beginning of the pandemic, people that wanted to follow along with the services, etc. And people have continued using that, and they've been able to connect more with the services. And I'm very thankful that so many of our monasteries and parishes have really good resources out there. And I'm hoping that will continue to be available, because sometimes it's hard to find those things. And I think that we always encourage a lot of people to come sing in our choir if they want to learn more about the services. So I think that having some of these resources out there has been very helpful for people that I've known, and I'm hoping that that sort of accessibility will continue.
You know, I'm sort of struck hearing about Father Nicholas's work with the OneDrive. I think many of us are reproducing the efforts of Father Nicholas to some extent or another. We really, really need to talk as a church and about trying to consolidate some of these efforts. I know there's a lot of duplication going on, but wouldn't it be great if there was a link we could go? The OCA.org is awesome, but many of us are trying to do even more. Does anyone know anything about other resources related to what Zoe's mentioning or what Father Nicholas has been doing that we should be mindful of?
Father Justin? I just wanted to say, Father John Wheeling's parish in Arkansas, I think it's St. John of Chicago, their website, the liturgical resources on their website for choir directors, has most of the Sunday octoikos and those things there, together with feast days and like Lent and the other seasons of the church. Father John and his choir director have really done an amazing job of producing that music and sharing it to the whole world. So I think the pandemic, for me, in the beginning of the pandemic, it was either have myself, my choir director, and an altar server, or to have the blessing of having 4 individuals be able to sing in the choir by just making it me and my family. I lost for a time the resources of having a good choir director and his capabilities, because with him not being there with us, it was phone calls saying, Basil, where can I find this? Or how do I do this? Or where do we put the services for Holy Week together? And St. John's, or Father John's, I think it's St. John of Chicago Parish in Arkansas. He's OCA. You can find him on the OCA website. But my son is also the choir director for St. Michael's in Broadview Heights, and he called and said, Dad, you need to, you don't need to try to produce this stuff yourself. It's out there, and Father John's parish provides it. So I think we just need to be better about sharing where those resources are. The only thing that I will say in terms of my OneDrive, as a former bookstore and press manager for St. Tikhon's, the only thing that I'm concerned about with what I'm doing is, typically I put those services there for my own people. And then because we had people during Lent, by the thousands, basically, we averaged 1.5K, I think, through Holy Week and Lent online. We shared those to everyone. The thing is that I don't know what the copyright ramifications are of those. The drive is there. If you want them, you're free to use them. But I also think I take a certain risk in publishing them, because they're not free resource material. Even our own OCA liturgy book, has copyright. So I hope I didn't make a mistake by saying that. But those resources are there. We're thankful to be able to provide them. But there are issues with sharing those things too. So just keep that in mind.
Of course, the OCA.org would need to be more careful than a little parish, right?
Right.
No, that's a very good point. We're at time here. We have about 2 more minutes. Would either Father Nicholas or Father Crow like to share a final word before we depart in peace?
Just a thank you to everybody for listening to our small experiences and successes and failures, and we're all on the same journey, even if it's in different stations right now. And I guess my only encouragement to myself and hopefully others is, it seems like parishes that are doing okay right now are the parishes where people are taking risks and working hard and upping their game. So let's keep upping our game throughout the summer. I noticed my own energy dropping as we hit July, and it's not yet time for that.
Thank you. Father Nicholas, the final word.
I just want to say thank you too. Thank you to the many of you that are out there that have been with us through the day-to-day prayers and other things. Know that myself and the parishioners of St. Nicholas will be praying for all of you every day. We look forward and feel the prayers that you offer for us. And I think praying together and staying together as a parish and church community is the real way we're going to conquer not only this pandemic, but any physical or affliction that comes our way as we move forward as a church. But thank you, Father Justin, for being such a gracious and cordial host too.
Thank you so much. One of Joe's mottos, and I'm probably butchering it, but fail fast and fail often. And I know all of us have experienced a lot of that in the last 4 months, but I'm encouraged by people trying. And I think that's a major reason why some of us are going to pull through this okay with God's help. So everyone keep trying and keep failing and keep pulling things together again. And the lady, please keep advising your priests on your thoughts. I know some of the best ideas we've gotten have been from our lay people. And without their help, we couldn't have done the live streaming and so many other things that we've done. So it's really a team effort. Thank you all. Thank you, Joe, for hosting us together. Thank
Father Justin, let me just jump in here and say thanks to the three of you. You know, when we planned these kind of sessions, we had no idea how they would go. I don't know how the other two went, but you folks were the prototypical great session. Thank you very much. You know, and something you said about fail fast. Someone else said something like, "I'm less afraid of the new normal than I am about going back to the old normal." You know, and so there are tremendous opportunities we have in this. I could put in plugs for sessions that will happen this afternoon, but when we gather in 30 minutes, we've landed exactly on time. We'll have Father Sean Levine, and I'll probably show a couple of the slides that I didn't have time this morning. Thanks.
Thank you all. God bless.
Sure.
Mhm.